I've actually had a whole different identity this entire time. I'm your host Yusuf, or am I? These are the top 10 criminals who changed their identity to stay hidden. Make sure you like and subscribe to get notified whenever we upload a new video. Anyways, let's get a fake passport. Number 10, John Dillinger. John Dillinger, one of the most notorious criminals in American history, was often glorified by the American media for his daring bank heists and thrilling prison escapes. He operated in the 20s and 30s during the Great Depression era, and was idolized by many as the modern-day Robin Hood, because he stole from those same institutions that were capitalizing on the American people's misfortunes. Dillinger's career as a criminal included over 11 bank robberies throughout the Midwest, in which he stole in excess of $300,000 and 3 separate jailbreaks. The mystique surrounding Dillinger's exploits was so captivating that people often forgot or turned a blind eye to the fact that he was responsible for at least 10 slaughters, including that of a sheriff, the passings of several innocent bystanders, and that he left a trail of carnage in his wake. Dillinger's activities, however, did not go unnoticed by Chief Investigator Melvin Purvis of the FBI, who was assigned the task of bringing Dillinger and his gang to justice. When J. Edgar Hoover and the FBI named Dillinger the first public enemy #1 on his 31st birthday in 1934, his fame took on a new meaning, and his name and face became recognizable in every household throughout the Midwest and the rest of the country. There was even a $10,000 reward for his capture. Now a public figure, Dillinger turned to plastic surgery to alter his identity and evade Purvis and the rest of the law enforcement community. In those days, plastic surgery was not as common as it is today, and the medical procedures were primitive, dangerous, time-consuming, and very painful. Dillinger underwent several bouts of plastic surgery, some more successful than others, but in the end he only managed to slightly alter his appearance. After one round of plastic surgery, from which he was extremely disappointed to find that he still looked the same, one of the doctors suggested that he remove his fingerprints as a way to escape being detected. Dillinger liked this idea and elected to undergo the painful process of obliterating his fingerprints. Number 9, Freddie Thompson. According to the New York Times, Freddie Thompson, 35, switched places with another prisoner during an arraignment. The other prisoner was facing a less serious charge of a leafy substance possession, and consequently, Thompson was mistakenly released. Thompson, who was caught for attempted execution and served prison time after pleading guilty to a lesser count including robbery charges, managed to fool authorities by making the identity change. It is unclear how exactly he was able to pose as the other prisoner during his arraignment in a Staten Island courtroom. The mistake points to a series of recent problems by the area's law enforcement agencies. In February, a prisoner posed as a different defendant at an arraignment on a lesser charge. That fugitive, Michael Bautista, 22, is still at large. Police Commissioner Raymond Kelly has rejected the idea that the escaped prisoner exploited a possible loophole. There are ways to verify a prisoner's identity, including checking pictures, he said, but apparently that may not have been done appropriately. Each year, about 400,000 arrests are made and prisoners are processed. The judge released Thompson on his own recognizance. Thompson walked out of court scot-free. It wasn't until several hours later, when the prisoner who Thompson impersonated asked why his name hadn't been called, that authorities realized a mistake had occurred. Number 8, Bela Kiss. Bela Kiss was a Hungarian serial executioner who cops believe ended 24 people. Kiss was nicknamed the Hungarian Pickler because he preserved his victims' bodies in large barrels. Born in Hungary in 1877, he had a rough childhood. In 1912, only a year after marrying his much younger wife, he discovered she was having an affair. Soon after, she and her lover would disappear. Although Kiss claimed that they had left together for a better life in America, the truth was that he ended both of them, becoming Kiss's first victims. This was the start of his execution spree, but for the rest of his victims, he lured women in. Through personal ads in the local Budapest newspaper, he placed ads under the name of Hoffman, claiming to be a lonely widower looking for marriage. He connected with women who were generally well off and whose families were not living nearby. His good looks and personable charm helped to attract them. He was even able to have some of the women sign over their wealth and give him money. Number 7, Frank Morris. In 1960, Frank Morris was sentenced to serve a prison term at Alcatraz. You know the place. The infamous penitentiary was built in 1934 on an island in the middle of San Francisco Bay. Isolated in the water more than a mile from San Francisco, it was designed as an inescapable jail. But when brothers Clarence and John Anglin got to Alcatraz in 1961 and befriended Morris, the trio decided to put the island's reputation to the test. The three men stuffed plaster dummies in their cell beds in the middle of the night. With roving guards believing the men were asleep, they quietly escaped through carefully cut holes in their cells. Once outside, they fashioned a makeshift raft out of raincoats and set sail into the bay in the middle of the night. They were never seen again. Initially, prison guards assumed the three men had been eaten by sharks. That is still a distinct possibility, but ocean currents would have undoubtedly brought body parts up to shore. Instead, no trace of the men's remains, clothes, or raft has ever been found. Because of that, authorities aren't actually certain whether they successfully escaped or not. If they did escape, however, you bet that they changed their names and their identities. Number 6. Between the spring of 1968 and the fall of 1969, 3 women were terminated in Glasgow, Scotland. Patricia Docker was strangled to passing in February 1968. Her crime went unpunished. A year later, Jemima McDonald was strangled in a nearby neighborhood. 2 months after that, Helen Puttock was also brutally ended in Glasgow. By then, cops started to realize similarities in all 3 slaughters. DNA testing wasn't the norm back then, but police picked up on patterns of how the girls were ended and where they were found. Cops also began to hone in on a description of the butcher, a redhead between the ages of 25 and 35 who's around 6 feet (1.8 meters) tall. Upon distributing a sketch to the media, cops labeled the butcher Bible John. It came from Puttock's passing. She and her sister had met 2 men during a night out on the town. Both men were named John. Puttock's date for the evening had an infatuation with quoting the Bible. Throughout the night, he delivered impassioned sermons from the book of Moses. The women jokingly called him Bible John. The name kinda stuck. Number 5. Frank Matthews. Frank Matthews was a notorious substance kingpin in the early 1970s. The New York City native was one of the largest suppliers of substances in the United States. His operations stretched from New York to Miami. Police believed Matthews cleared more than $20 million from his substance empire. He had a network of over 200 dealers working for him, all selling substances he bought from Colombian sources. His operation was so successful that it destroyed the profits of the rest of New York City's substance dealers. This led to tensions between Matthews and other dealers. In 1972, 2 of his associates were ended in a drive-by shooting. Matthews himself narrowly avoided being stopped when an explosive was placed under his car. In 1973, after an arrest, Matthews jumped bail and disappeared. Some believe he was ended by rivals, others say he went into hiding to avoid the lifelong prison sentence that surely would have followed. If he did go into hiding, then we know he changed his identity. That's just the smart thing to do. Number 4. The Freeway Phantom. The Freeway Phantom was a self-given moniker for a Washington, D.C. serial butcher who has never been identified. The butcher was active around America's capital in the early 1970s. In total, he ended 6 young women over a 17-month period. Like the Zodiac butcher before him, the Freeway Phantom sent creepy messages to the police. After executing 18-year-old Brenda Denise Woodard in November 1971, police found a note in one of her pockets. This is tantamount to my insensitivity to people, especially women. I will admit the others when you catch me if you can. Freeway Phantom. The Phantom name stuck as police found more bodies near highways and other main thoroughfares around Washington. Police worked leads in the 6 passings, including one long look at 2 ex-cops who were convicted of a separate execution. However, they failed to make any headway in finding the butcher. In 1974, the FBI stepped in and added to the list of suspects. The Freeway Phantom appeared to leave as quickly as he arrived. No more passings were linked to his pattern after that awful 17-month period early in the decade. And soon, the case went cold. The investigation is still active in DC to this day, though cops have been criticized for shoddy evidence keeping and a lack of progress on the awful case. Number 3. Victor Gerena. Victor Gerena was an employee of a Wells Fargo armored car in West Hartford, Connecticut in 1983. That summer, he was recruited by the militant group Los Macheteros to help with a bank heist. The activist group wanted independence for Puerto Rico. Their clandestine run had previously targeted American government officials. officials. Now they were seeking money to fund their operations. Gerena's knowledge of the armored car depot made him a natural recruit for Los Maqueteros leader Juan Enrique Segarra Palmer. When Gerena led the heist on September 12, 1983, it all fell into place. The Wells Fargo employee tied up two of his co-workers and injected them with sedatives to make them fall asleep. He then loaded more than $7 million cash into a rental car and drove off. At the time, it was the largest cash heist in American history. Neither Gerena nor the money was ever seen again. Segarra Palmer wasn't so lucky. In 1985, the FBI tracked down Segarra Palmer and 8 of his Los Maqueteros peers in Puerto Rico. They were extradited to Connecticut and convicted on a variety of charges relating to the bank heist and other events. The ringleader was sentenced to 55 years in prison and served about 2 decades before being freed in 2004. Gerena has likely fared far better though. He was never found. Number 2. John Ruffo. John Ruffo is one of the rare escaped fugitives not wanted for a violent crime. The businessman had a lengthy career scamming and defrauding investors to the tune of hundreds of millions of dollars. His most lucrative scheme, according to authorities, was to pose as an executive of the Philip Morris Tobacco Company and convince banks to grant him fraudulent loans. Cops claim Ruffo went around to banks boasting of a research program called Project Star. He would tell finance officials the project was geared toward developing smoke-free cigarettes for the tobacco giant, and they needed seed money to buy computers for the supposed research. It was all a ruse though. Banks would grant loans to Ruffo's company, CCS Inc., and he would simply vanish with the cash. For a while, he got away with the scheme and eventually pocketed some $350 million in phony investments. Number 1. Amado Carrillo. In the 1980s and 1990s, Amado Carrillo Fuentes was one of the most successful substance smugglers in North America. The Mexican man created an empire for the Juarez cartel. He smuggled more substances from Colombia to the United States than anyone else in the world. Cops knew him as the Lord of the Skies for the fleet of private planes he used to fly massive quantities of substances all over the world. However, it all ended in the most unlikely way. Fuentes passed away in 1997 during plastic surgery. The substance kingpin had been trying to change his appearance to avoid being captured by DEA agents. Unfortunately, a surgical mishap left him passed on the operating table. With it, his substance empire came crashing down. For police, Fuentes' passing was bittersweet. The man they'd spent so much years chasing was removed and gone. He never faced justice over his substance empire though. By going to his grave prematurely, Fuentes forever avoided the wrath of the law. Thanks for watching. Leave a like and comment if you enjoyed this video, and we'll see you next time on Crime Time.